They told him he didn't belong here. A black man in worn jeans walking into a luxury restaurant alone must be a mistake. Rachel Monroe didn't check his name, didn't ask a question. She called security before he reached the host stand. Guests clapped, proud of their exclusive space being protected. But what they didn't know, Malcolm Carter wasn't just any man. He owned the entire chain, and in 12 minutes, every smiling face would freeze. One call. That's all it took. And this time, the reckoning wouldn't stop at one restaurant. It would shake an entire industry. The crystal chandeliers of Elysian grace sparkled like frozen fireworks overhead, casting golden halos across tables lined with bone-white linen and silver cutlery polished to reflection. Diners in tailored suits and silk dresses murmured over imported wine, savoring the exclusivity that came with the restaurant's unlisted phone number and 3-month reservation wait list. At the entrance, the air shifted. Malcolm Carter stepped inside. He didn't look like he belonged. That was the unspoken rule the room agreed on the moment they laid eyes on him. A tall black man in worn Levi's, a weathered leather jacket, and boots still dusted from an airport curb. He moved with quiet purpose, scanning the room with eyes that had seen war zones, boardrooms, and boardroom wars. His presence didn't shout. It hummed, low, unwavering, like the engine of a Rolls-Royce idling in neutral. But to Rachel Monroe, the front-of-house manager with a symmetrical blonde bob and pearls as white as her judgment, he might as well have been graffiti on marble. "Excuse me, sir," she said, stepping forward with a rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Are you looking for someone?" "Yes," Malcolm replied, his voice calm, almost gentle. "I have a reservation." Rachel didn't ask for a name. Her eyes scanned his clothes, his skin, the duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the kind a coach would toss under a gym bench. "I'm afraid this is a members-only establishment. Perhaps you're looking for the bistro down the block?" A pause. Malcolm's lips didn't move. His eyes didn't blink. He simply tilted his head slightly and said, "I'm quite sure I'm in the right place." Rachel's smile curdled. She turned slightly, angling her body toward the 2 security staff posted at the far end of the lobby. "Gentlemen," she said softly, but loud enough for the surrounding diners to hear. The signal was unmistakable. One table of guests, all white, all older, leaned back to watch. A woman in a cashmere shawl shook her head. A young man in a tux smirked into his cocktail. Malcolm's reservation was for 1, but he had an audience of 40. "You'll need to leave," Rachel said, her tone no longer pleasant. "Now." He reached slowly into his jacket, a movement that made one of the guards visibly tense, and pulled out a folded printout, the confirmation email. He extended it politely. Rachel didn't look at it. "I don't need to see that. You're not on the list." Behind her, Marcus, the assistant host, shifted uncomfortably. He had started his shift 30 minutes ago. He hadn't checked the system yet, but he had a gnawing feeling in his gut. He wasn't sure why this man felt familiar, but something told him to speak up. "Rachel," he murmured, "maybe I should just—" "I said he's not on the list," Rachel snapped without turning around. "Escort him out." The guard stepped forward. Malcolm sighed, still calm. "Are you absolutely sure?" Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Don't try to intimidate me. You're lucky I'm not calling the police." The room held its breath. At a table near the back, a young man named Ethan, mid-20s, hoodie under a blazer, unmistakably tech money, had been recording the entire interaction. Not out of activism, just instinct. He had a bad feeling. And when Rachel said, "Lucky I'm not calling the police," he pressed send. The video flew across encrypted Wi-Fi, landing seconds later in the inbox of Carter Global's executive assistant, Sarah Lynn. She didn't open it right away, but she would, and soon. Back in the lobby, Malcolm allowed the guards to approach. He didn't resist, didn't raise his voice. One of the guards, a former Marine like Malcolm, recognized something in the way he stood, shoulders relaxed, feet planted, eyes forward. This man wasn't a threat. He was waiting. Rachel turned triumphantly, already walking back to her podium. "We maintain a certain atmosphere," she said to no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "People have to earn their way into places like this." Malcolm glanced at Marcus. "You might want to check the system after I'm gone." Then he let the guards walk him out, slowly, like a man taking inventory of every detail. The guests who averted their eyes, the manager's smirk, the pianist who kept playing without missing a note. Outside, the sky had deepened into a velvet dusk. Malcolm stepped onto the pavement and looked back at the glowing interior. For a moment, he stood motionless. Then he reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out his phone. He scrolled to one name, press dial. Inside, Rachel was laughing at the bar with a regular, retelling her version of the story. "You should have seen him. Looked like he wandered in off a bus from Jersey. Said he had a reservation. Can you believe that?" Marcus finally opened the system and froze. There it was. 7:00 p.m. VIP flagged. Carter, Malcolm. Notes. Confidential. CEO evaluation visit. Do not disclose identity. His blood drained. He looked toward the door, but Malcolm was gone. The automatic doors whispered shut behind Malcolm, but the storm he left inside had only just begun to swirl. Marcus stood frozen in front of the host terminal, his fingers hovering above the keyboard. The name stared back at him in bold, unmissable font. Malcolm Carter. VIP flag. Confidential visit. CEO. His heart thudded. He had only seen the name in interdepartmental memos once or twice. Never expected to encounter it in real life, let alone eject him from the property under the direction of a smug manager. Rachel's laughter echoed from the bar. "Honestly, some people think walking in with attitude is enough to get a table here. He didn't even have a blazer." Marcus's jaw clenched. He had joined Elysian Grace 2 years ago, hoping to learn high-end hospitality, not perform gatekeeping for racial elitism disguised as atmosphere. Tonight shattered the thin veil he had tried to believe in. Before he could speak, Rachel turned sharply. "What are you doing just standing there? Reset the host screen and get back to your post." "I think we should..." "We should what?" she snapped. "Feel bad for someone who clearly didn't belong here? Don't get soft, Marcus. This is a business. Standards matter." He swallowed, the words rising in his throat. Instead, he logged out of the terminal and nodded. "Good," she said, pivoting on her heels and walking off toward the private dining section, her heels clacking like punctuation marks. Marcus reached under the host stand, grabbing the evening reservation binder, pretending to reorganize it while his thoughts raced. He hadn't just seen a name. As Malcolm had been escorted out, the man's jacket had shifted, revealing a black leather card wallet clipped discreetly to his waistband, embossed with the Carter Global Holdings insignia. It hadn't registered immediately. But now it burned into his memory like a brand. Could it be? A sudden chill passed through him. What if that really was the Malcolm Carter? Rachel had always had a superiority complex, but this could be the moment her arrogance finally caught up with her. And the worst part? She wouldn't even realize it until it was too late. At that moment, Ethan, the tech bro who had recorded everything, stood up and quietly left the restaurant. He wasn't sure who the man was, but something told him that video he just sent was bigger than a viral TikTok. He checked his phone. Still no reply from the assistant he sent it to, some Carter Global email he'd found on LinkedIn. He shrugged. Either it would blow up or it wouldn't. But he had a hunch. Back inside, Malcolm stood across the street, his figure partially obscured by a lamppost's shadow. He wasn't angry. Anger required energy. What he felt now was something colder, refined, focused. This wasn't the first time he'd been judged by his appearance, but it might be the last time someone in his own building got away with it. He pulled out his phone again and typed a brief message. Initiate Level 1 Internal Audit, Elysian Grace. Notify Legal. Discreet flag. Rachel Monroe. 20-min window. He hit send. Back inside, Marcus debated whether to quietly alert someone higher up. But what could he say? That he had a gut feeling? That the man Rachel just humiliated might own the entire company? Then again, wasn't that what Malcolm had hinted at? You might want to check the system after I'm gone. He took a step toward the manager's office, then stopped. Rachel was returning, and she was not alone. I've just spoken with one of our investors, she said loudly, clearly for everyone nearby to hear. He was very impressed with how we handled that situation. Said it reminded him why he backs exclusive venues like ours. Marcus stared at her, trying not to let his face betray the sinking realization. An investor? Or someone who shared her bias? Rachel turned to Marcus again. I want you to update our flagged guest list. Add that man, Malcolm whatever, to the DNR file. Marcus blinked. DNR? Do not return, she clarified with a satisfied smirk. If he shows up again, I want security alerted immediately. But, Marcus started. No but. This is why I run the front. You let one unqualified person slip through and suddenly everyone thinks they're entitled to 5-star service. It dilutes the brand. Marcus bit the inside of his cheek. She was spiraling, and she didn't even realize it. As Rachel returned to her routine, schmoozing with regulars, adjusting place cards, micromanaging wait staff, Marcus slipped back behind the host desk. He opened a separate tab on the system, one not visible to lower-tier staff. It required a passcode, one only assistant managers or higher had. He'd learned it by accident weeks ago. He typed in Malcolm Carter. The profile expanded. Carter Global Holdings, CEO, net worth estimated $3 billion, flagged as confidential auditor for high-level property evaluations. Immediate priority access. Staff instructed to comply with all requests and report any obstruction. His stomach dropped. She had no idea what she'd done. Marcus pulled out his own phone. He wasn't about to call the media, but maybe, just maybe, he could alert someone before this turned nuclear. He typed a short message to one of the regional directors listed on the staff bulletin. Urgent. Possible VIP guest incident tonight. Need confirmation on Malcolm Carter presence. Advise ASAP. He didn't hit send yet. He hesitated, because part of him wanted to see what would happen if Rachel's arrogance met its match. Publicly, undeniably. Part of him wanted to watch the fallout, but mostly, he wanted to do the right thing. He saved the message in drafts. Across the street, Malcolm watched from the shadows as guests arrived and left, unaware that the man they had just dismissed now had the power to shut the entire place down. His phone buzzed with confirmation. Internal audit request received. First phase in progress. He slid the phone back into his jacket and turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Inside, Rachel raised her glass in a mock toast to a table of loyal patrons. To exclusivity, she said. The clock behind her ticked. 12 minutes left. The sun dipped below the skyline like it was folding itself into velvet. Malcolm stood at the corner across from Elysian Grace, the warm gold glow from the restaurant spilling across the sidewalk, brushing against his boots. He didn't move. He simply looked at the building like it was a chessboard, the game already in motion. He took out his phone again. This time, he didn't call a number. He opened a secure app used only by senior executives within Carter Global Holdings, a private satellite-linked system routed through encrypted servers, inaccessible even to regional VPs. He tapped the voice icon and said evenly, Activate Phase 2. Full alert to internal affairs. Cross-check employee file. Rachel Monroe, Elysian Grace. Timeline, past 24 months. I want records, guest complaints, performance reviews, everything. The app replied in a soft chime. Command confirmed. Processing request. Estimated report delivery, 4 minutes. Inside the restaurant, Rachel breezed past the host stand with a flourish, unaware her name was being run through corporate scanners more thorough than any government database. She was too busy retelling her heroic act of keeping the restaurant's standards intact. At table 7, a guest scrolled through his phone mid-conversation. He paused. "Hey," he said, nudging his wife. "Didn't that guy get kicked out earlier?" He turned the screen toward her. It was a video, less than 30 seconds. Grainy, but clear. Malcolm standing calmly as Rachel called security. The caption read, "Luxury restaurant manager ejects black man without checking reservation. He says he owns the place. Thoughts?" The wife frowned. "Is that the same guy from Forbes last year? The hotel magnate?" 2 tables over, another guest overheard. "Wait, that's Carter? Malcolm Carter?" By the time Malcolm's report arrived on his phone, the video had already crossed 200,000 views. His inbox chimed with a new message from Sarah, his assistant. Subject, urgent. Online chatter. Elysian Grace. Body, video of incident trending. Do you want me to begin press containment or let it escalate? ETA for Phase 3 implementation if ordered. 10 minutes, standing by. He typed back, "Let it escalate, no interference. I want it real." Meanwhile, inside the IT control room of the Elysian Grace HQ server farm, 4 miles away, a Level 3 alert flashed on screen. An AI detection system flagged unusual behavior. Manual override of a flagged guest, cross-referenced with confidential visit scheduling. The system automatically escalated to executive risk monitoring. The on-call IT manager squinted at the report. "Whoa," he muttered. "Why is a CEO-level ID being blocked on property check-in?" He clicked to investigate. Back at the restaurant, Marcus glanced at the terminal again. A new system message popped up, blinking red. Executive presence detected on site. Match, Malcolm Carter, CEO, confidential evaluation, internal monitoring active. His breath caught. He looked around. No one else saw it. Rachel strutted by, barking orders at a server about wine pairings. The glow of the monitor reflected the warning onto Marcus's stunned face. He hesitated, then raised his hand. "Rachel, I think you should see this." She turned with mild annoyance. "What is it now?" He tilted the screen toward her. "The system, it says Malcolm Carter's on site." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. That's probably one of those junk security flags. The system's been glitchy since the last update." "No, it's a direct flag," Marcus insisted. "Executive risk tier." Rachel snorted. "Marcus, I've worked here 12 years. I've seen this garbage before. You let it get in your head, and next thing you know, you're apologizing to someone who scammed their way in with a fake email and a story about being an owner." She jabbed a key, minimizing the alert. "Besides, Carter, he's never set foot here. I would have known." Marcus didn't argue. He just watched as she silenced the only warning that could have saved her job. Across the street, Malcolm received a second update from Internal Affairs. Preliminary results. 17 flagged incidents under Rachel Monroe within the past 18 months. 6 unfiled complaints, corroborated by other staff. 3 settlements paid out under NDAs. He let out a slow breath. This wasn't about a mistake anymore. This was a pattern. He scrolled to his media team contact. Message: "Monitor social sentiment. Prepare public statement template. Await my command. Timing is critical." His phone buzzed again. From Sarah, internal back channel says Rachel dismissed the system alert. Marcus tried to raise it, recommending we fast-track Phase 3. "Your call." He replied with one word: "Proceed." Inside the restaurant, Rachel breezed past the private room where a couple of VIP guests had just asked to speak to the manager. Marcus followed behind. "They say the man you removed earlier might be someone important," he whispered. She rolled her eyes so hard they nearly spun. "He's important now because people online say so? Please. Twitter is not HR." She opened the door and smiled at the guests. "How can I help you?" The man, wearing a navy Tom Ford suit and a subtle lapel pin identifying him as a senior partner at one of Carter's major investors, didn't smile back. "Was your name Rachel Monroe?" he asked. Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes." "You may want to check your internal comms," he said, sliding his phone toward her. The screen showed a corporate email chain she hadn't seen. one forwarding the video, the flag alert, and Carter's name circled in red. Her stomach dropped. She looked at Marcus. He wasn't smiling either. Back outside, Malcolm turned to walk down the block. His phone buzzed once more. Internal note: security team has reclassified incident as priority reputation breach. PR protocols triggered. Legal watching in real time. Do you want to return to property for official reveal? Malcolm typed slowly. Yes. Make sure the cameras are rolling. He paused at the next corner. 12 minutes had passed. Checkmate was about to begin. At the 62nd floor of the Carter Global Holdings headquarters, the executive lounge was unusually quiet. It was the golden hour, normally reserved for pre-dinner drinks, soft jazz, and smooth negotiations. But tonight, the mood shifted the moment a red alert pinged across the central risk dashboard. The tablet in front of Regional Director Alan Kessler lit up. Alert: Executive Incident, Flagship Location, Elysian Grace, NYC. Subject: Malcolm Carter. Severity: Level 3. Alan squinted, leaning forward. At 57, he had weathered corporate storms, mergers, lawsuits, and leadership reshuffles. But this was different. CEO-level alerts didn't come casually, and Malcolm Carter, though rarely visible in day-to-day operations, had the reputation of a silent earthquake. You didn't see the tremor until the building cracked. He tapped the notification. Footage began streaming in, live from internal surveillance systems at Elysian Grace. No sound, but clear visuals. He saw Malcolm enter the restaurant, saw Rachel approach, her posture arrogant, dismissive. The security call, the quiet exit. Then he saw Marcus looking stricken, the host terminal flashing an alert, and Rachel dismissing it. Alan pinched the bridge of his nose. "Oh, Rachel," he muttered. He picked up the phone and called his senior systems officer. "Get me a full audit report on Rachel Monroe. Now." While he waited, Alan opened the internal HR database. He remembered Rachel, promoted quickly, strong performance reviews from her direct supervisors. But there'd been murmurs, whispers in exit interviews, one flagged guest complaint, quietly buried. Then another, and another. Then, a few years ago, the record had gone clean, sanitized, as if someone upstream had started deleting shadows. His thoughts were interrupted by a ping. The system officer had delivered the file. Alan skimmed it fast, eyes narrowing. 3 official warnings for unwelcoming behavior. One from a black executive guest who had been told there were no available tables, despite the dining room being half empty. Another from a woman in a hijab who was steered toward takeout due to our current dress code enforcement. And a third, most interestingly, was marked archived upon board directive. Board directive? That's when it clicked. He opened the executive sponsorship database. There it was. Rachel Monroe, sponsored employee. Primary sponsor, Charles Ellison. Charles Ellison. Carter Global's largest private shareholder, known for his old-school values, and a man who had clashed with Malcolm more than once over the company's diversity initiatives. A man who had once said, offhandedly during a private meeting, "Let's not turn our 5-star restaurants into diversity showcases." Alan clenched his jaw. Now it made sense why Rachel had never been fired, why incidents had been swept under rugs woven in privilege. Malcolm had probably known, or at least suspected, and now, this wasn't just about one manager. This was about leverage. He picked up the phone again, this time to legal. "I want you to prep a corporate liability brief. We may have a conflict of interest breach from a board member. Confidential for now." Back at Elysian Grace, Rachel was beginning to sense something was wrong. The energy in the room had changed. Waiters were whispering. Guests were looking at her strangely. Her phone buzzed with emails from HQ marked high priority, acknowledge receipt. She didn't open them. Instead, she turned to Marcus. "Why are guests asking about Malcolm Carter? You told me that was a glitch." Marcus looked like he was choosing his words carefully. I told you the system said he was a VIP. You minimized the warning. I minimized a software bug, she snapped. That doesn't mean he's some billionaire in disguise. A waiter approached timidly. Ma'am, the couple in booth 6 just asked if we really threw out the owner. They say it's trending on social media. Over 2 million views. Rachel's face went pale. She whipped out her phone, opened Twitter, and there it was. The video, the hashtags, the comments. Justice in hospitality. #Carter walks in. #Rachel gate. She swiped down furiously. Her inbox exploded with messages, PR alerts, HR pings, board notifications. Then she saw a name that made her stomach lurch. From Malcolm Carter. Subject, Executive Evaluation. Elysian Grace. Body, Rachel, you've made quite an impression tonight. I'm returning to the property shortly. Please ensure your conduct reflects our brand values. I'd hate for you to miss what comes next. Her breath caught. What is this? She whispered, reading the message again. Marcus stood silently nearby, watching her world unravel. Back at headquarters, Alan received a new message, directly from Malcolm. Alan, prepare the board. I'm calling an emergency meeting at 8:00 p.m. tonight. Forward all findings on Rachel Monroe and Charles Ellison's interventions. It's time to clean house. Alan replied quickly. Understood. I'm ready. He knew what was coming. Malcolm wasn't just making an example of Rachel. He was taking aim at the entire culture that enabled her and the power structures that protected her. Rachel, still glued to her screen, suddenly remembered something. Years ago, at a board dinner, she had made an offhand comment about keeping the clientele exclusive. She thought she was being strategic. Charles had laughed and raised his glass. She thought that meant safety. But now, she realized too late. Charles wouldn't save her from this. He wouldn't even try. She was useful, until she became a liability. And tonight, Rachel Monroe had become radioactive. The revolving doors of Elysian Grace turned once again. This time, no one tried to stop him. Malcolm Carter stepped back into the restaurant he had been thrown out of just 25 minutes earlier. His stride was steady, his expression unreadable. But there was a shift in the air. It wasn't just the quiet. It was reverence, recognition, fear disguised as formality. The same maitre d' who hadn't looked twice at him before now stood rigid, wide-eyed, as if a monarch had arrived unannounced. A couple at the bar gasped. A waiter dropped a spoon. A woman near the window leaned into her partner and whispered, "Oh my God, that's really him." Malcolm's return wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The silence around him was its own announcement. Rachel, however, remained blissfully ignorant. She had retreated to the manager's office, frantically scrolling through messages, still trying to convince herself this was a misunderstanding, a PR stunt, a hoax. She hadn't yet processed the fact that the man she dismissed with a sneer could actually be the same man whose signature appeared on the paychecks of half the staff in that building. Meanwhile, Marcus approached Malcolm cautiously, unsure whether to speak. "Mr. Carter?" he began. Malcolm glanced at his name tag, then nodded. "Marcus, thank you for checking the system." I tried to stop her, sir," Marcus stammered. "She wouldn't listen." "I know," Malcolm said evenly. "You'll have a chance to speak up soon." Then, with a slight nod, he walked past him toward the dining room. Every head turned. The man who had been humiliated in front of them now walked among them like a ghost reborn. And somewhere in the background, phones buzzed again. Updated tweets, breaking headlines. Carter returns. #Justice is coming. At table 12 near the window, a new guest had just arrived 10 minutes earlier. A black woman, mid-30s, stylish in a cream jumpsuit and natural curls pinned up elegantly. She carried herself with quiet authority, the kind that made people assume she was someone important, even if they couldn't name who. She wasn't on a date. She wasn't here for the food. She was here on assignment. Her name was Alexis Reed, investigative journalist for the New York Times. Her editor had sent her to Elysian Grace that week to probe a pattern of selective service, tipped off by a string of anonymous complaints and a suspicious settlement trail. But tonight, what she got was gold. She had witnessed Rachel's earlier outburst, had seen Malcolm being removed, and she had stayed, watching, documenting, waiting. Now, her time had come. She requested a glass of water in a quiet corner booth. The server took her name, checked the iPad, and nodded. But as Alexis walked to her seat, Rachel emerged from the back hallway, flustered and red-faced. She spotted the unfamiliar black woman and immediately walked over. "I'm sorry," Rachel said, forcing a tight smile. "Did someone confirm your reservation?" Alexis turned slowly, measuring her response. "Yes, I believe Marcus seated me." Rachel glanced around, then back at Alexis. "It's just, we've had issues tonight, and I need to make sure everyone is where they're supposed to be." Alexis smiled, unfazed. "Are you asking if I'm supposed to be here?" Rachel's eyes flicked over Alexis's outfit, the lack of visible jewelry, the press badge tucked just barely inside her clutch. "We have a dress code," she said stiffly, "and a wait list." "Is that so?" Alexis replied. "Funny, I made the reservation through your corporate office, part of a larger review piece. Perhaps you've heard of it. Selective service in high-end dining, a hidden crisis." Rachel's mouth opened, and stayed open. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. She turned. Malcolm stood there. "Hello again, Rachel," he said, his tone calm, controlled. She tried to compose herself. "Mr. Carter, I didn't realize—" "You didn't realize a lot of things," he interrupted, starting with who you were speaking to just now. Alexis rose from her seat and extended a hand to Malcolm. "Mr. Carter, pleasure to finally meet you in person." "Likewise, Ms. Reed," Malcolm said, shaking her hand. "I've read your exposés. Sharp work." Rachel paled further. "You're a reporter?" she croaked. "Investigative journalist," Alexis corrected. "And tonight, I came here for a story, but you've outdone yourself." "Rachel," Malcolm said, returning his gaze to her, "you've now repeated the same behavior with two guests, one of whom is a CEO, the other, a national journalist. That's not just bad judgment, that's systemic behavior." "I didn't know," Rachel pleaded. "I thought—" "You thought you could judge worth by appearance," he cut in. "You thought you were safe because no one would challenge you. You were wrong." Guests had started standing up now, drifting closer. Staff peeked from the kitchen, phones tilted toward the scene. Rachel took a step back, but Malcolm wasn't done. He turned to Alexis. "Would you be willing to join us for the staff review session in 10 minutes? I think it's time the employees hear from someone outside the echo chamber." Alexis nodded. "Absolutely. And I'll be recording, if that's all right." "Please do," Malcolm said. "Let the truth be documented." Rachel looked around. For the first time, she noticed the space differently. Not as her domain, but as a courtroom, and she was on trial. She had lost the crowd, and more than that, she had lost control. Malcolm turned once more toward the host stand. "Marcus, can you gather the staff in the private dining room? We'll begin the debrief shortly." "Yes, sir," Marcus said, already moving. Rachel stood frozen as the room continued shifting away from her. Her legacy, built on polished menus and polished prejudice, was collapsing. And standing at its center, watching it fall, was the man she had tried to erase with one dismissive glance. The private dining room of Elysian Grace had never felt this silent. Dozens of staff members gathered, their crisp uniforms slightly wrinkled from a rushed end to their shifts. Chefs still wore aprons. Servers clutched trays under their arms. Even the sommelier, who rarely left the wine cellar, stood quietly at the back, sensing something monumental was about to happen. At the front of the room stood Malcolm Carter. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound fists. He simply looked at every face in the room with the calm weight of leadership forged through decades of watching, listening, and remembering. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to thank those of you who serve our guests with dignity, no matter what they look like or where they come from." His eyes rested briefly on Marcus, who stood tall beside him. "But tonight," Malcolm continued, "we witnessed something else. A moment where image trumped character, where assumption overruled truth, and it wasn't the first time." He stepped back slightly and nodded at Marcus. Marcus took a breath and turned to the room. "This man," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, "is not just another guest, not just a name on a reservation list. This is Malcolm Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Global Holdings, the man who signs every paycheck in this building." Gasps erupted. Several mouths dropped open. One server clutched her heart. Rachel, who had been called into the room moments earlier, staggered as if someone had struck her. You're Malcolm Carter?" she said, her voice cracking. Malcolm didn't respond. He didn't need to. Rachel turned to Marcus. "You knew, and you didn't tell me?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I tried. You ignored me." Suddenly, two security guards stepped forward from the corner of the room. Malcolm gave a simple nod. One of them addressed Rachel directly. "Ms. Monroe, we're instructed to escort you to the staff holding area pending investigation." Rachel's eyes widened. "Wait, no! You can't be serious." A third voice cut through the tension like a razor. "Oh, it's very serious." Heads turned. From the back of the room emerged Olivia Tran, Senior Compliance Officer for Carter Global's Northeast Division. She'd slipped into the restaurant an hour earlier, unnoticed, following protocol for internal investigations. "In fact," Olivia continued, holding up a small device, "I've been listening since the beginning, and this," she pressed play, "goes beyond tonight." A muffled audio recording played over the room. Rachel's voice filled the space, but it wasn't tonight's confrontation. It was older, meaner. "I don't care if he's some executive's cousin. If he can't afford a tailored suit, he doesn't get a seat by the window. This isn't a soup kitchen." Gasps rippled. Another clip played. "This guest, she's wearing a hijab. That's going to make the others uncomfortable. Offer her takeout and comp it. Just don't seat her inside." And another. "Look, we're not saying it out loud, but this place has a standard. We're not a diversity experiment." Silence. The recording ended. No one moved. Rachel looked like she'd been hollowed out. Her knees buckled slightly. "That wasn't supposed to be recorded," she whispered. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "It wasn't supposed to be said." Malcolm stepped forward again. "These recordings were submitted anonymously by a former assistant manager who left the company in disgust. But we couldn't act without corroboration." He gestured around the room. "Tonight, we got more than that." Rachel's voice trembled. I was just trying to protect the brand." "You became the thing the brand was created to fight," Malcolm said coldly. He turned back to the room. "I founded Carter Global on the belief that elegance and equality aren't opposites, that luxury doesn't have to mean exclusion. But when leaders forget that, when gatekeepers start playing gods, then we all lose." He nodded to the security team. Rachel, still in shock, was gently guided out of the room. She didn't scream. She didn't resist. The fight had drained from her the moment her own words echoed back at her like a verdict. Marcus stood beside Malcolm as silence lingered in her absence. Then, slowly, someone began clapping. It started in the back, a sous chef with oil-stained sleeves. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the room erupted in applause. Not just for Malcolm, but for the truth finally spoken. Malcolm raised a hand, signaling quiet. "We have work to do," he said. "The kind of work that doesn't get featured on Instagram. But it matters." He looked around. Tonight was ugly, but it was also necessary. The mirror cracked, and we finally saw what's been festering underneath. Now, we rebuild. He paused. "And we don't forget." The staff nodded, many still stunned, others deeply moved. Outside the room, word of Rachel's removal had already spread. Guests whispered, tweets updated, hashtags trended higher. Malcolm didn't care about the buzz. This wasn't about optics. This was about culture. And tonight, a curtain had finally fallen on a performance too long protected by silence. The main dining room of Elysian Grace, once the shrine of whispered elitism and polished pretense, now hummed with electricity. The kind of hum that precedes a tectonic shift. Not loud, but deep. Every member of staff returned to their stations, but none carried the same energy. They were waiting to see what Malcolm Carter would do next. In the center of the room, the soft jazz faded. A lone spotlight from the ceiling, usually reserved for anniversaries or proposals, shone directly on the center table, where Malcolm now stood with Olivia Tran by his side. Alexis Reed, the journalist, filmed discreetly from her corner booth. Marcus stood nearby, back straight, eyes sharp. Rachel had not returned to the floor. Malcolm cleared his throat. "I want to thank you all for your professionalism tonight," he began. "But I also want to share with you the reason I came here, under anonymity." He paused, allowing silence to bloom. 2 weeks ago, Carter Global Holdings finalized the full acquisition of the Elysian Group, including this flagship property. The room went still. Servers looked at each other. Hosts blinked. Kitchen staff stepped out of the back, abandoning pans and prep bowls. "This means," Malcolm continued, "effective immediately, every policy, every leadership decision, and every staff appointment will fall under my direct oversight." He pulled a folded contract from his inner jacket pocket and placed it gently on the host podium. "This is the final signed agreement, and with it comes a new mandate." Olivia stepped forward and clicked on the projector mounted above the wine bar. A screen descended slowly as the lights dimmed. She opened a slideshow titled Elysian Integration Protocol, Phase 1, Culture Reset. The first slide, a list of names under Immediate Personnel Review. Then another list. Bold, red, highlighted. Emergency Termination. Effective tonight, top of the list, Rachel Monroe, former general manager. Even those who suspected it gasped. Seeing it in black and white was different. Real, permanent. At that moment, Rachel re-entered the room. She had been escorted away earlier, allowed to gather her things and compose herself in the small HR office above the main dining space. But she couldn't resist the curiosity, the instinctual desire to reclaim control. She stepped into the spotlight at the exact moment the slide changed. Her name, glowing on the wall, her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, a protest, maybe a plea, but no sound came. She looked at Malcolm, finally seeing him not as a stranger, not as a trespasser, but as something more dangerous, someone who knew her. And in that instant, something in her brain clicked. A flash of memory. A lecture hall. Spring semester, junior year. Economics 302. A quiet young man in the back row. Brown skin, ripped shoes. Hand-me-down blazer. Always took notes. Never spoke unless called. She remembered mocking him once, loud enough for her friends to hear. "Someone should tell him this class isn't for the broke." She blinked at Malcolm now. "It's you," she whispered. "You were that kid." Malcolm's expression didn't change. "You're Malcolm Carter, from NYU." A beat of silence. "Yes," he said. "I am." Rachel swayed slightly. But you were no one." Malcolm tilted his head. "That's what you thought, and that's what you've continued thinking. Even when I walked into my own restaurant tonight." The room shifted. It wasn't just humiliation now. It was reckoning. Olivia stepped forward again. "Ms. Monroe, your termination is effective immediately. A legal team will follow up regarding prior settlements and complaints. You are no longer authorized to access any Carter Global facility." Rachel looked around, searching for allies, defenders, anyone who might plead on her behalf. No one moved. Even Charles Ellison, her old protector on the board, had gone silent. Malcolm had already begun proceedings to remove him for conflict of interest. Rachel took a step back. Her mouth opened, then closed. She turned and walked out, Not escorted this time, but alone. The door clicked behind her. Malcolm turned back to the staff. You may wonder why I chose tonight to act. The truth is, I've been watching, not just this restaurant, but all of them. I wanted to see if the culture matched the brand. He let that sit. In some ways, it did. The food, the ambiance, the service, exceptional. But in others, it failed. It failed because people like Rachel decided who was worthy based on shoes, skin color, or accent. He took a breath. That ends now. He looked at Marcus. Tomorrow, your interim general manager. HR will assist with your transition. But tonight, you'll close us out. Marcus blinked. Sir, Thank you. Malcolm turned to the room. You'll receive new training protocols, new evaluation systems, and a raise. The room broke into scattered applause. Small, hesitant, but sincere. Malcolm raised a hand one last time. And remember, luxury isn't about exclusion, it's about experience. And the best experience starts with respect. The spotlight dimmed. The new era had begun. By dawn, the story had broken containment. What started as a single tweet from a tech-savvy bystander had exploded into a global headline. CEO kicked out of own restaurant in racial profiling scandal, blazed across news tickers. Every major outlet picked it up. CNN, BBC, Bloomberg. Social media pulsed with hashtags. Justice in hospitality, #Carter unmasked bias, #Rachel Gate. But it was no longer just about one manager's fall from grace. It had become a movement. Outside Elysian Grace, cameras now formed a fortress. Reporters in trench coats and microphones braved the early chill, broadcasting updates in real time. Guests canceled reservations. Investors requested emergency meetings. And Carter Global, rarely the kind of company to court public drama, did something it had never done before. It fought back, openly. At 8:00 a.m., the company launched its official response, the Justice in Hospitality Initiative. The campaign included sweeping changes to anti-discrimination protocols, a $5 million fund to support underrepresented hospitality professionals, and a public apology signed by Malcolm himself. The accompanying video ad, just 90 seconds long, was cinematic, raw, and unflinching. Footage showed Malcolm entering the restaurant, the security guards approaching, the refusal to check the reservation, the removal, then the return. The silence, then applause. It closed on the phrase, "Respect isn't optional, and justice isn't a trend." The video hit 30 million views in under 6 hours, and then came the twist that no one expected. A familiar face appeared on Good Morning America. Graying at the temples, dressed in an elegant navy suit, was Derek Langston, one of the most well-known media investors in the country and a long-time regular at Elysian Grace. For years, Derek had been associated with Carter Global through quiet investments and high-profile partnerships. But today, he looked different. Not powerful, not polished, regretful. "I want to make a statement," he told the anchor, eyes heavy. 5 years ago, I had a personal experience at Elysian Grace that mirrored what happened to Mr. Carter. I was seated in a back corner despite arriving early with a reservation. I asked to move tables and was told, politely but firmly, that prime tables are reserved for our traditional clientele. The anchor frowned. That sounds eerily familiar to what Rachel Monroe said on record last year. Derek nodded. Yes, I recognized her voice. It was Rachel. I didn't say anything back then because, well, I was invested. Financially, socially. I thought if I pushed back, it might create conflict I wasn't ready to manage. He paused. But watching what happened to Malcolm, knowing who he is, what he represents, I realized silence isn't neutrality. It's complicity. He looked directly into the camera. To Mr. Carter, and to every guest I failed to stand up for, I am sorry, truly, and I am withdrawing all personal stakes from Elysian Grace until the new protocols are in place. This has to be more than a headline. It has to be a turning point. The apology swept across platforms. It wasn't rehearsed or slick. It was raw, and it mattered. Thousands of other guests followed, sharing similar stories, emboldened by Derek's public reckoning. Meanwhile, Malcolm sat in a quiet office at the Carter Global headquarters, watching it all unfold. He didn't smile. This wasn't a moment for triumph. This was a reckoning long overdue. Sarah entered with a fresh batch of press inquiries and a quick update. Your GMA segment is scheduled for tomorrow. BBC wants to do a documentary angle, and the NAACP has requested a partnership opportunity. Malcolm nodded. Greenlight the NAACP call. Push the interviews, but make sure every outlet gets the same message. This isn't about me. It's about everyone who was ignored because someone didn't bother to look beyond a jacket or a surname. Sarah hesitated. And Derek Langston? Malcolm leaned back. I always wondered if he'd speak up. Took him long enough. But you'll accept the apology? Malcolm considered it. Yes, public courage deserves acknowledgement, but he'll have to rebuild trust the same way the rest of us do, through action. That afternoon, Elysian Grace remained closed, not because of shame, but transformation. Outside, a small sign was taped to the front door, handwritten in elegant script. We're not shutting down, we're leveling up. Inside, training materials were distributed, managers replaced, old policies shredded. And in the center of the main dining room, beneath the chandelier that once cast light on quiet cruelty, a circle of chairs had been set up for the new Equity Advisory Board's first meeting. Malcolm would lead the inaugural session himself. The media might move on, the trend might fade. But inside those walls, the standard had changed forever. Because respect wasn't just a word anymore. It was policy. It was culture. It was Carter. The conference room at Carter Global headquarters had never been this full. Every screen on the back wall glowed with live feeds from other Carter-owned properties across the country. Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, London. Dozens of managers sat tensely on their end of the camera, unsure what to expect. The incident at Elysian Grace had shaken them. Not just because of the public fallout, but because Malcolm Carter himself was leading the next meeting. No middle management, no communications buffer. Malcolm appeared on screen, standing behind a podium flanked by two flags, one with the Carter Global crest, the other a stark banner that simply read, Dignity Audit Initiative. He didn't smile. This morning, we began phase 2 of our cultural realignment, he said, voice calm but sharp. Effective immediately, Carter Global is launching a comprehensive dignity audit across all restaurants and properties in our network. A low hum buzzed across the various feeds. This audit, Malcolm continued, will assess every policy, every guest complaint, every hiring practice, and every service decision made over the past 3 years. No exceptions, no sacred cows. He tapped a folder. 38 senior managers have been placed under internal review, with duties suspended until investigations conclude. These individuals have been flagged for possible violations of our updated Code of Hospitality. Some of them you may know. Some may be sitting in your very meeting rooms right now. Managers looked at each other nervously. Eyes darted. Screens flickered with silent realizations. This is not a witch hunt, Malcolm said, but a reckoning. We are no longer rewarding metrics if they come at the cost of human dignity. Olivia Tran, now officially Director of Culture and Ethics, stepped beside Malcolm. All managers will receive audit briefings within the next 24 hours. Compliance teams are being dispatched. If you believe you've upheld our principles, you have nothing to fear. But if your success has been built on exclusion, now is the time to step forward, voluntarily. She paused, scanning the camera. Because we will find it. Every buried complaint, every comped meal meant to silence someone, every manipulated seating chart, and when we do, there will be consequences. The room at HQ was silent. Then Malcolm added, and there will be rewards for integrity. Those who've championed inclusion when no one was watching will rise. The meeting ended without questions. just silence, and one resignation. By noon, a confidential email reached Malcolm's direct line. It came from Stephen Adley, a longtime investor and one of the board's most influential members. Malcolm knew him well. They had stood on stage together for ribbon cuttings, shared glasses of scotch in celebration, but there had always been something performative about Stephen's gestures. The email began without greeting. "Malcolm, I've reviewed the footage. I have seen the reports. I cannot, in good conscience, continue to hold stake in a company I helped shape this way. Attached is my letter of resignation and a formal offer to sell my shares at current market value. I expect no praise, only closure." Malcolm frowned. Something felt off, too clean. He called Sarah. "Pull Adley's internal communications archive. I want to know what changed his tone so suddenly." 10 minutes later, the answer came. An internal leak, a string of emails traced back 6 months, between Stephen and 2 regional managers. One message, in particular, stood out. "Our exclusivity is what keeps the margins premium. If we start seating everyone in prime areas, we'll dilute the brand. Let's keep the traditional elegance intact, no matter what the culture team says." Malcolm read it twice. It wasn't coded. It wasn't cautious. It was clear. He forwarded the email to Olivia. "Mark this as evidence for ethics review. Also, accept the share buyback offer, but make sure the board knows why." An hour later, Carter Global's internal bulletin posted an announcement. Board member Stephen Adley resigns amid internal review. But the real story played out behind the scenes. With Adley's shares back in corporate control, Malcolm's voting power surged. He now held a rare supermajority, the kind of leverage that allowed for rapid structural reform without waiting for full board consensus. And he planned to use it. He called in his senior legal advisor. "We're restructuring board voting procedures. I want 2 permanent seats allocated to community and employee representatives. No more echo chambers." "And the existing board?" the advisor asked. "They'll adjust, or they'll follow Adley." Meanwhile, press coverage of the dignity audits exploded. Every journalist who had once covered Carter's expansion now returned for the follow-up. But Malcolm didn't shy away. He appeared on CNN that evening. When asked if the mass suspensions would hurt business, he replied, "Short-term pain is the cost of long-term honor, and I'm not running a business that excludes people who look like me." By nightfall, 3 more senior managers voluntarily resigned. And for the first time in Carter Global's history, frontline staff received anonymous channels to report misconduct, reviewed directly by the Culture and Ethics Office. No filters, no silencing. Malcolm stood by his office window, watching the Manhattan skyline glitter in the dark. Justice had begun with one insult, but now it was being codified, embedded into the system that had once tolerated silence. The dignity audit wasn't just policy, it was legacy. They came in slowly at first, just a few messages, handwritten and nervous. Then a wave. By the end of the week, Malcolm's office had received over 100 personal letters, emails, and recorded voice notes from Carter Global employees across the country. Most were apologies. Some were confessions. Others were raw, unfiltered stories of guilt. I watched a woman cry in our lobby after being told she wasn't fit for the ambiance. I didn't say anything. "I'm sorry." I laughed at a joke my manager made about urban names on the reservation list. I should have walked out that day. I didn't. I comped dessert to a man we made wait 40 minutes because he was in jeans. I wish I'd comped his dignity instead. It wasn't corporate speak. It was human. And Malcolm read every single one. He didn't publish them. He didn't need to. The dignity audit had already begun changing the very soul of the company, not by force, but by reflection. The culture wasn't just being cleaned. It was shedding skin. The rotten layers were peeling off, revealing something closer to honest beneath. Some letters came with resignations. Servers, hosts, even a few assistant managers stepped down voluntarily. They cited shame, a desire to start over elsewhere, or simply the realization that they weren't ready for the level of accountability now expected. Malcolm accepted each with dignity. Not every exit was a loss. But perhaps the most striking ripple came from a direction few expected. In Washington, D.C., Representative Danielle Price, a poised, fiercely intelligent congresswoman from Michigan, stood on the steps of the Capitol during a press conference. Cameras crowded the marble stairs, reporters leaning in. "I want to tell you a story," she said. "It happened 6 years ago." She explained how she and her sister had visited New York for a political fundraiser. They had reserved a table at Elysian Grace, excited to try the famed 5-course tasting menu. But when they arrived, on time, dressed in tailored suits, they were told there was no record of their reservation. "We asked to speak with a manager," Danielle continued. "We were met by a woman who glanced us up and down, then said, and I quote, 'Perhaps you're confusing this with one of our sister properties. We maintain a refined atmosphere here.'" The crowd murmured. Danielle smiled tightly. "We left, humiliated, furious, and I told myself, don't cause a scene. You're a public figure, be gracious." She paused. "But silence is not grace. Silence is surrender." Then she looked straight into the cameras. "I've spoken with Mr. Carter, and with his support, I'll be introducing the Hospitality Equity Act to Congress, legislation that will mandate bias training, anonymous equity reporting, and accountability metrics for all federally licensed hospitality establishments." The press exploded with questions. Malcolm, watching from his New York office, leaned back and let the weight of her words wash over him. He hadn't asked her to do that, but he was glad she had. Back at Elysian Grace, Marcus posted a new framed message in the lobby. It replaced the old "Our dress code reflects our standards" plaque. The new one read, "We don't serve clothing, we serve people." Guests took photos of it. Some cried in front of it. One woman asked to speak to a manager, not to complain, but to thank them. In the background, staff continued to train, reflect, and relearn. Some were still uncomfortable. Change hurt. But most were awakening to something they didn't realize they'd been missing. A woman named Rita, who had worked as a hostess for 7 years, handed Malcolm a sealed envelope one afternoon. Inside was a letter. "I used to think I was just following rules, but now I see I was guarding a gate I didn't build. I told a young man last year that we didn't have space when we did, because he wore sneakers. He smiled, thanked me, and walked out without a word. That moment stayed with me. Mr. Carter, I'm still here because I want to unlearn what I thought was professionalism. I want to learn compassion. Thank you for this second chance." Malcolm held the letter in his hand for a long time. He thought of Rachel. She wasn't writing letters. She was receiving them, served in cold manila envelopes by firm hands in business suits. 12 lawsuits and counting. 12 former guests who had finally found their voices. Some had records of the mistreatment. Others had witnesses. And a few simply had the national conversation at their backs. Rachel's lawyer had called twice. Malcolm hadn't answered. The court would. Meanwhile, the Carter Global legal team issued an official statement. "We do not support or defend the actions of former employees who acted outside of our core values. We welcome legal accountability and will continue to cooperate fully with relevant authorities and investigations." The statement trended for 12 hours straight. By the end of the week, Rachel Monroe had become less a name and more a cautionary tale. Business schools analyzed the crisis. Hospitality journals declared the scandal a wake-up call. And in corners of the world where quiet racism still wore suits and smiles, people shifted, uneasy now, knowing someone might finally call it out. The shift was cultural, it was legal, and it was just beginning. 3 months later, the interior of Elysian Grace looked the same. Same marble floors, same soft lighting, same polished mahogany bar. But everything had changed. Gone were the cold, clinical reservation screens that ranked guests by presentation status. Gone was the silent pressure to conform to a code of appearance rather than conduct. In its place was something radical in its simplicity: welcome. The staff had changed too, not replaced necessarily, but rewired. The company's new Dignity curriculum had turned servers into storytellers, hosts into listeners, managers into mentors. Training sessions focused less on pouring champagne correctly and more on how to recognize unconscious bias and uphold dignity under pressure. At the center of this renaissance stood Marcus Ellis, newly appointed general manager. He wore the same suit he had worn the night of the incident, but now it seemed to fit differently. Or maybe it was him who had grown into it. Today, Marcus was leading his final capstone session of the company's Dignity First Executive Leadership Series. He stood before a group of trainees, clicking through a presentation that didn't just quote leadership theory. It reflected lived experience. Your job, Marcus told them, isn't to judge who walks through those doors. It's to show them they're worth being here. Even when, especially when, the world tells them otherwise. The trainees clapped at the end. Some stood to shake his hand. Marcus offered them all a nod of encouragement, then stepped aside to speak with the guest observer seated quietly in the back of the room. Malcolm Carter. He hadn't said much during the session, but now, as the room emptied, he approached Marcus with that calm presence that always seemed to command gravity. "You've done well," Malcolm said. Marcus smiled. "I had good examples." Malcolm studied him for a moment, then handed over a small envelope. "What's this?" Marcus asked. "Open it." Marcus tore the seal, unfolded the letter, and froze. It was on official letterhead, embossed, pristine, Columbia Business School. Inside was a full scholarship offer to the school's executive MBA program, co-sponsored by the Carter Foundation. Marcus blinked. "Sir, this can't be for me." "It is," Malcolm said. "You've already proven yourself in practice. Now it's time you gain the credentials to match." Marcus was speechless. Malcolm continued, voice low. "When I was your age, I walked into a boardroom where no one looked like me. I felt small. I overcompensated. I burned out twice. But then someone gave me a scholarship, believed in me before I had the language to believe in myself." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You remind me of that version of me, only stronger." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes, but he blinked them back. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Malcolm replied. The mentorship wasn't just professional. It was generational, a quiet passing of the torch, not in title, but in spirit. Outside, the buzz around Elysian Grace was starting to shift again. The media frenzy had long faded, but the restaurant had returned to the spotlight, this time for its groundbreaking reforms. Food critics now mentioned service transformation alongside truffle risotto. Human rights orgs applauded the Carter Group's equity model, and guests from all walks of life, dressed up or dressed down, found themselves greeted the same way. "Welcome, we're glad you're here." A young couple from Harlem dined next to a tech CEO from San Francisco. A wheelchair user found that every path to every table was now accessible, not just legally, but naturally. One family requested Marcus by name. "Our friend told us he's the reason your vibes changed," the father said. She was right. Back in his office, Malcolm reviewed the latest audit reports. Complaints were down 47%. Staff retention had improved by 60%. Guest diversity was up across all Carter Global properties. But what made him pause wasn't the numbers. It was the story attached to one entry. A guest named Aaron, formerly rejected for wearing streetwear, had now become a regular. On his latest visit, the server had complimented his sneakers and asked where he got them. "I almost cried," Aaron had written in his comment card. "Not because they liked my shoes, but because they saw me." That was the goal. That was the legacy. As Malcolm packed up for the evening, Sarah knocked gently. "One last thing," she said, handing him a frame. Inside it was a photo, grainy but powerful. The moment Marcus shook hands with the graduating class of Dignity First trainees. Underneath, engraved in brass, Service is not a transaction, it's a declaration of worth. Malcolm hung it near the door, so everyone leaving the room would remember what they'd walked in to do. 2 years had passed. New York moved fast, and Elysian Grace, like the city itself, had learned to evolve without forgetting. The neighborhood had changed. More independent bookstores, fewer luxury car dealerships. But the restaurant remained, not as a fortress of exclusivity, but a lighthouse of warmth. On a quiet Sunday evening, a man in a plain navy coat pushed open the glass doors of Elysian Grace. By his side, a young boy no older than 10, holding his hand, eyes wide with wonder. "Whoa," the boy whispered. "This place looks like the palace in that spy movie." The host smiled. "Welcome to Elysian Grace. Do you have a reservation?" "No," the man replied. "Walk in, okay?" "Of course," the host said, consulting the tablet. "We have a lovely window table available. Would you like it?" The man nodded. "Perfect." They were led through the softly lit dining room. The boy kept pointing at everything. The high ceilings, the sculpture near the fireplace, even the dessert cart that rolled past. "Can we get that later?" he whispered. "We'll see," the man replied, chuckling. No one asked for his name. No one questioned his attire, dark jeans, modest sweater. No one recognized Malcolm Carter, CEO of Carter Global Holdings, billionaire, architect of one of the most radical cultural shifts in hospitality history. And that's exactly how he liked it. The menu had changed slightly over the years, more plant-based options, more family-sized portions. But the energy was unmistakable, calm, welcoming, and human. A server approached, cheerful, polished, and genuinely present. "My name's Jeremy. I'll be taking care of you both tonight. Anything you don't eat or have allergies to?" The boy looked at his dad. "We're good," Malcolm said. "Thank you." As they ordered and laughed over appetizers, Malcolm scanned the room. He saw what he had once dreamed of: diversity in faces, in clothes, in backgrounds. The dining room was no longer curated by status, but by connection. He looked at his son, eyes wide with curiosity, so much like his own at that age, and felt a pang of peace, not pride. Peace. After dinner, Jeremy returned with a dessert cart and a surprise. "We like to offer young guests a complimentary explorer's treat. A sampler from the pastry chef." The boy gasped. "For real?" Malcolm smiled. "That's very kind of you." As the boy devoured his chocolate mousse, Jeremy leaned in slightly. "I don't want to intrude," he said. "But you look familiar. Have you been here before?" Malcolm chuckled. "A few times, long ago." "Well, I hope you keep coming back. We're a different place now. Better, I think." "I can see that." Before they left, Malcolm guided his son toward the lobby, where a newly installed display stood beside the wine cabinet. It was unassuming, no neon, no spotlight, just a simple wooden frame above a leather bench. Inside the frame was a photograph. 3 men, smiling. Malcolm, Marcus, and a younger staff member from the Dignity First graduating class, all standing beneath the restaurant's chandelier. Below the photo was a small plaque in brushed gold. "Dignity isn't granted, it's protected." The boy read it out loud. "Dad, what's that mean?" Malcolm knelt beside him. "It means no one has to earn the right to be treated like a person. That right is already theirs, but it's our job to make sure the world doesn't forget it." The boy nodded, solemnly. "That's cool." Malcolm squeezed his shoulder. "It is." They walked out into the cool evening air, city lights blinking against the skyline. Inside the restaurant, staff continued to move with rhythm and grace. No one whispered about power. No one bragged about celebrity guests. They just worked, with dignity. The legacy Malcolm left behind wasn't carved into skyscrapers or etched into stock prices. It was quieter, but deeper. It was a culture rebuilt, a silence transformed, and a future protected.